I'm gonna do my level best.
Okay.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are when you're able to catch us on this episode of In Conversation With. I am absolutely delighted today to be joined by Siobhan, our CEO. Again, Siobhan, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come into the conversation.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to meet people that we've already met before and continue our journey down the road. So great to see you, David, and David, of course, both Davids.
and David Margo, who some of you may remember from a previous In Conversation With episode. And today we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the processes around divorce, separation, and what professionals can benefit by having that extra awareness. So, David, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
It's great to have you back in the digital room. I hope the canapes in the green room were all good and everybody was looking after you okay in Digi World. But why don't you give the audience a chance to get to know a little bit about you, your background, and then maybe what are your thoughts about the legal profession and how that's presented in the world of divorce, especially.
Okay, yes, thank you, David and Siobhan. Okay, very briefly, my background, I spent nearly 40 years in the law, but in the commercial world. I was a senior partner in a London city practice with 100 partners, 500 people, but dealing with commercial work, nothing at all to do with divorce. I left the profession in 2007. Just wanted to change really, and had some ideas about what I might do. And purely by chance got talking to a lady who told me that she'd separated from her husband. And I can still remember her very words from 15 years ago when she said to me, I need to do something about my divorce, but I don't know where to start. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't help her because I said I knew nothing at all about the divorce world. But I did have that sort of light bulb moment where I thought to myself, gosh, there must be so many people like you. What do you do when you're suddenly faced with this horrible situation of getting divorced? And that prompted me to look into the legal process of divorce. And I have to say, I was really surprised at what I discovered. So before perhaps we stray into what I discovered and different ways of processing your divorce, my overview of the legal divorce world is as follows. First of all, most of us, when faced with divorce, if we can afford it, we trot off to a solicitor. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. And the truth of the matter is that solicitors do have a different agenda to the clients. Solicitors are running a business, and therefore there's a temptation on their part that the longer the case goes on, the better it is for the lawyer. And of course, in that situation, the worse it is for the client. It's worse for a client because of the costs, and secondly, all the heartache that goes with a long divorce case. So you have to be careful who you instruct. And the other thing to mention is that most people's knowledge of the divorce process is limited to either I can go to a solicitor and go through the court process, or I can try something called mediation, which, by the way, mediation is a very good way of settling a divorce, if you can. It doesn't work in every case, but where it works, it's regarded as being comparatively cheap, quick, and less confrontational. But so that's where people's knowledge of the divorce process ends. But there are lots of other processes available these days. And we're a divorce consultancy that handholds people through divorce to stop them making expensive mistakes, the expensive mistakes that we think they would make because they just don't know what else is available and don't know their way around the system. And of course, when you're consulting a lawyer and paying hundreds of pounds an hour plus VAT for their time, and they say to you, this is what we're going to do, normally you go along with it, because why would you know any better?
Yeah, there's no other point of reference, is there, other than that one source of intelligence. And we've spoken previously around there are, as you say, lots of different ways to process through that experience. And you picked up a point which I just want to touch on very briefly, and that's the heartache that goes along with divorce. The legal arena is very clinical in its stepping stones that it processes, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, if one party wants their day in court, the fact of the matter is they are going to get their day in court. There isn't anything that you can do about that, but you can then look at ways of minimizing your costs. And there are things that you can do, and perhaps we'll mention those in a minute. But yeah, you know, finding a nice way to divorce is very difficult. And that's where you guys can come in, obviously, to help people with the emotional side of getting divorced. And we work with people like you to do that.
And I know, Siobhan, you and I have had thousands of conversations around the collaboration projects that APA take on, and working with David was something you were very, very keen to bring into the mix for APA. What are your thoughts on how the therapeutic professional can engage with consultants like David, who, you know, I know APA has done previously?
Well, firstly, I do work with people that are going through divorce, and you know, somebody can actually appear literally suicidal on the basis of the start of that journey. So as a therapist, I'm really comfortable at some point during my appointments with anybody at really recommending David, because I actually see a real simile in exactly what David says about people don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They just hear what a solicitor says and they have to run with it because they're not a legal individual. In exactly the same way that APA is consistently trying to advocate what a qualified therapist is, you know, where to go to find one that's absolutely ethical and appropriate. So I see a real simile. And for me, it was really important to have David on board because I work with those clients and I'm comfortable at saying to them, there's somebody here and there's an organization here that recognizes the complications that you're facing. It's not my remit, but would you like their number? And David is fully aware of that fact. So, you know, because I know the legal system is so complicated. It's stressful enough without the grief of loss running alongside that. And for a lot of people, it is the grief of loss. It's the loss of a dream, a loss of a future. So there's all that emotional stuff underneath that's running. So I think David's it's a fantastic company to be involved with because so many people are going through divorces. What better way than to have an advocate that's on your side, independent of the legal systems, to help and guide you, to avoid you, as you say, making costly mistakes, David. So yes, I'm really glad to have David as somebody in my phone that I can go, there you go, have a number, he'll help you. I can't, but he can, or in relation to the practical and legal side, definitely. So David Margo, sorry, I'm making sure that I go between the two of you here. David Margo, what would you say was the hardest bit that you've witnessed in relation to what people go through legally?
Yeah, I think it's people who think that by litigating, they're going to solve their issue. You know, all the hurt that they've suffered is going to be solved by litigation, and therefore they pursue litigation through the courts to the nth degree. And of course, that isn't going to solve their emotional issues. It never does. The best way of getting divorced in my opinion, is across the kitchen table, where the two people can agree it between, but of course, not many people could do that themselves.
Mm.
The next best way is mediation. I think that's a really good way. Doesn't work in every case, but where it works, it's really good. And by the way, people it seems to be getting more common for people to, in intense situations, difficult situations, for people to bring in a therapist to the mediation itself. So that if things get a bit heated, the mediator can say, look, I'm going to leave you guys with the therapist for half an hour, and you can, and then the mediation session will continue, and hopefully we'll have be able to find some solutions. So that's, people are looking at much more holistic ways these days, and that's certainly the approach that we take of trying to resolve these horrible situations that people get themselves into.
Yeah, I see it all the time, David, and I share certain techniques, and they've really helped clients along the way. So anybody going through a divorce, you've got two angry adults, but if there's children involved, it's so important for neither person involved in that divorce to constantly criticize the other parent to the child. And I see that really, really regularly. The damage that can do psychologically to the child growing up, because they go one way or the other. They either become fearful of the person that's criticizing the other parent, so they copy them to please them, which creates a real division between themselves as a child and the other parent. So actually, I literally share this technique with clients. I say to them, if there's one thing I'm going to ask you to do, it's never criticize the spouse, the partner, whoever it is, to the child that you both have. And the repercussions of that, and I've had lovely feedback throughout the years where somebody's gotten in touch with me a year down the line and they said, thank you so much, because actually my children are now living with me. And it was because they abided by that rule and didn't psychologically try and split the child up between two parents emotionally. So there's really two sides of it. There's the legal side of it, which, as you say, unless you're in the profession, you just don't know where to start. And there's the emotional side of how you do it. And in truth, that does take, in my opinion, guidance and control in relation to mediation sessions or therapy family sessions. So yes, it's complicated, isn't it?
It's really complicated, and we're so often saying to clients, keep things factual, keep the emotion out of it, just deal with the facts, and of course look at it from the child's point of view. What is in the best interest of the child? And if you can do that and write your emails and have your conversations from the point of view of what is best for the children, it can cut through all that horrible emotional stuff. Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard.
And as a coach, I've given similar guidance on, if you're going to write an email in those situations, write it as though the child is going to read it. If the child is going to read that email, and if they're of an age where they can get access to your emails, guess what? They're going to read it.
Yes.
You change what it is you want that child to see in your communication.
In the old days, when we used to write letters, when I was training, people used to say, if you've got a difficult letter to write, draft it out, leave it overnight and look at it again in the morning and send it. The trouble is these days, of course, email, it's so instant, isn't it? And you're so emotional. So the temptation is to put off a horrible email to the other side, and really you just need to think about these things.
Yeah, and it's that reactionary state, isn't it, Von?
Yes, it's the ability to be able to step back, and that technique, David, that you're saying leave it till the next day, is exactly one of the techniques that I teach with absolutely everything. Learn to stop, take a pause, reflect, think, process, and then learn to respond rather than react. Because honestly, the damage done to children, if it's not handled well, and actually it's about both parents keeping the focus 100% on what they want their children to have down the line. Children losing a family as it is, to have the difficulties of adults imposed on them during that process, as well as their own loss, I've seen the repercussions 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And you know, divorce is so far-reaching. We don't think about this. I mean, there's roughly 100,000 people. There's 100,000 rather divorces a year. So that's 200,000 people whose life is not panning out as they perhaps saw it originally. And then you've got to add the children into the equation. So maybe each year there is a new batch of perhaps 250,000 people who are directly affected by divorce. And then you've got the ripples of that to the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, the cousins. You know, I reckon that every year there's a new million, at least 1 million people who are affected by divorce. And then when you think of the repercussions of that on schooling, where the schools have to deal with, you know, the behavior of the children who are being affected by divorce. You've got the NHS that's dealing with mental health issues, people who are struggling with divorce. You've got housing crisis, and of course, every time somebody gets divorced, one home becomes two. We don't think about all these issues, adolescent behaviour in society. So divorce is absolutely huge.
It is, and also it's really interesting that when you see things like COVID, for example, you know, it suddenly makes people live together again and focus on each other. But at the same time, they were also trapped with each other. And the psychological impact of that has led to lots of divorces.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve tends to be a real time where divorce goes through the roof, because it's almost like that unconscious / conscious way of thinking. New year, new start. I don't want this from the last year. I'm going to change it for this year. So I'll press that button and I will do my divorce now. You know, so it's a lot about endings and starting psychologically. And as you say, the ripple impacts is just so extensive, and we don't necessarily appreciate the ultimate loss of the dreams and the future, and how grief contains anger. And when you exercise your anger in a way that's reactive, whether or not it's around the kids or whether or not it's the other person, the divorce becomes emotional rather than factual. And the distress. I mean, we're seeing a prime example at the moment permanently in the news, which is absolutely horrific. I'm not even going to go there, but I know everybody will know exactly what I'm on about right now. So, you know, it is horrific, and it's re-traumatizing. So anything that's gone on for that person in their life prior to divorce, they're going through another trauma on top of what they've already been through simply by divorce.
Absolutely. And of course, I should mention that this year, in April, the new divorce law came in, no fault divorce. So you no longer have to allege any bad behaviour by the other party, which was normally unreasonable behaviour or adultery. So what happened is people used to take great exception to, you know, somebody saying that I had been, if I was the one getting divorced, I behaved in an inappropriate way or bad behaviour. And there'll be an argument right at the beginning of the divorce that I didn't do that, you did that. So that's all been taken away. So there's no fault divorce now. So all you have to say is that the marriage has irreconcilably broken down, and that entitles you to a divorce. So getting divorce has been made much easier. Just the process of getting divorced. It hasn't affected the big issues, which are, of course, sorting out the money and sorting out the children, if you're going to argue about who sees who, when and where. But the actual getting the piece of paper that says you're divorced has been made easier. And of course, for the last couple of years, you can divorce online. You can go to the government website, fill out the form. It's pretty easy to do, made easier by the new law, no fault divorce. You upload your marriage certificate and you submit your application online with a court fee, which has just gone up to something like £580. And it goes through the system and comes out the other end with your divorce.
And these are the kind of developments and processes that are designed by those that understand the negative connotations of how the system has run for hundreds of years. But the system, those legal practices that have been built up on that system, and that kind of spoon feeding of, we control the narrative, that's all starting to drift away, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, that's absolutely right, David. So a lot of people don't even know about online divorce, that you can do it online. So you don't need a solicitor to do that for you. You can save money by doing it online yourself. But then the public's knowledge of divorce, I think, as I said before, is either I go to a solicitor and try the court process, or I can do something called mediation. And that's where the public's knowledge of divorce generally ends. But over the last 15 years or so, other processes have developed. So there's now something called collaborative law. There's something called arbitration. There's something called direct access, and so on. And really, why people don't know about these other processes is because, as we said, people trot off to a solicitor, and the solicitor is likely to take you through the court process. The solicitor is unlikely to tell you about some of these other processes, because some of them don't even involve a solicitor. So why would they tell you?
And this is very much where I see the therapeutic community coming into its own in relation to supporting those that are going through it, or if they are going through it themselves, because we're all human beings. We all have those same pressures, those same challenges in our private lives as well as in our personal presentations. So by being able to be aware as a professional that those processes are not as archaic as they used to be, absolutely, but also being aware that the information that is being made available to people is being made available to people, put my teeth back in, because there is an agenda from that industry. And for a therapeutic professional to have that awareness changes the dynamic of the conversation, can't it, Bon?
Absolutely. And I was smiling because I was thinking we need lots of David Margos, because truth be told, in exactly the same way that APA's consistently enlightening and increasing awareness of what a therapist ought to be, as in qualified, supervised, all those kind of parts that the public aren't aware of, David's doing exactly the same thing, but with the legalities around divorce. Having somebody hold your hand through that. Personally, I've been divorced. I did it online, so I know, and I only did it online because it was literally the cheapest option. So I resisted even thinking about a solicitor, but it wasn't a complicated divorce. It was an easy situation to get through. Whereas actually having David, I think, is a phenomenal asset, and I think every therapist ought to have David's number in their notebook to be able to pass on to clients that are going through this. And I really mean this, because the stress of not knowing where to go, where to start, and honestly, psychologically, people go solicitors equals costing a fortune. It's literally an understandable process to think. Having David there, I love the fact that if somebody comes in and they're going through that, I can go, hey, I've got David's number in my back pocket here. If they want it, they can use it. So important to have somebody independent of the systems to guide and help.
At that point, can I just tell you about a couple of these other processes that people just don't know about? I mean, I think you'll be really surprised.
Yeah, please.
There's something called direct. One of the processes I mentioned called direct access is quite a good one as an example. So we all know that the way the legal world works is you've got a problem, you go and see a solicitor. That's what we've done for hundreds of years. The solicitor will get together all the background information, the paperwork, all the evidence. But eventually, as the case goes on, the solicitor will bring in a barrister. And they do that for two reasons. One is to get an expert opinion. And of course, the other reason is if it comes to court, the barrister is going to be the one who stands up in court and argues the case. The reason why solicitors go to barristers to get an expert opinion, and by the way, even some people say to me, hold on, I'm going to a solicitor who specialises in divorce, they're a divorce expert. Why would that solicitor need to go to a barrister to get an expert opinion? Well, it's a little bit like in the medical world, the GP and the specialist. A little bit like that. Barristers have a different training. Barristers are the real technical experts because they're in court most days of the week. First of all, they know what attitude the courts are taking on different matters because attitudes change. But secondly, they know the intricacies of all the cases because a solicitor would know the headline principle that was established by a certain case, but the solicitor is very unlikely to delve into all the legal arguments that went on during that case that produced that result. But the barrister would know all those technicalities. So the barristers are the real technical experts. That's why solicitors ask barristers for their expert opinion. That's the way the system's worked forever. Very expensive. Law is very expensive, but having these two people, solicitors and barristers, makes it even more expensive. And we are one of the only jurisdictions in the world that has this division of responsibilities. You know, for example, in America, you have attorneys who do everything. In Europe, you have advocates who do everything. But here we have solicitors and barristers. And that's the way it's been forever. It was never possible, because of the rules of the legal profession, for the public to consult a barrister direct. 15 years ago, the rules of the legal profession were changed, but nobody knows. It's now possible for the public to consult a barrister directly without going through a solicitor. It was never possible before. So what are the advantages of doing this? Number one, it's a cheaper process because you've only got one person. You cut out all the duplication of having a solicitor and a barrister. So it's cheaper. Secondly, you are then going straight to the expert, the person the solicitors asked for the expert opinion. You might as well go straight to the expert. Why go through the middleman? And thirdly, and people are really surprised when I say this, barristers are generally cheaper than solicitors. People often think it's the other way around, but it's not. So I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail and bore you with the detail, but the barrister profession is divided into two. So that you've got the top guys who are the QCs, Queen's Counsel. You know, when the dear Queen passes, those QCs are going to become KCs. King's Counsel is going to be really strange. But anyway, so the QCs, the top guys, can charge thousands of pounds a day for all their time.
And it's worth pointing out, David, I think that QCs within that league, that professional kind of development pathway, are kind of the next step would be to become judges and be decision makers in cases, aren't they?
Yeah, they're hugely experienced, these guys. They only really are required in the top cases. And as I say, they can charge thousands of pounds a day for their time. Any barrister who isn't a QC is called a junior. Junior doesn't mean you're 25 years old, just qualified. It means you're not a QC. So in the rankings, you've got the QCs at the top and then all the juniors below them. The juniors who are just below QC level are called senior juniors. Only the legal profession could do that. But you can, in London, you can hire a senior junior for £275 an hour plus that. Now, it's a lot of money, but in legal terms, that is fantastic value. I mean, you will not get a solicitor who's a partner in a London family law practice for £275 an hour. You'll get a junior assistant. So these guys are hugely experienced. Some of them, by the way, sit not as part-time judges. So some days of the week, they are judges in cases because the system's so overloaded, they're asked to help out. Some days of the week, they are barristers advising you and me, members of the public. So they're hugely experienced. Why does nobody know about direct access? Well, we said we all trot off to a solicitor. No solicitor's going to say to you, you don't need me, you can go straight to a barrister. And the barristers still get about 90% of their work from the solicitors under the old system, and don't really advertise direct access because they don't want to upset the solicitors.
As bringing them 90% of the business, and it is that kind of transition, isn't it? And you know, I can remember when I studied kind of introductions to law and everything else many years ago, that it is the kind of, this is the way we've done it. This is what has survived us. And as the mother of all law producers on the planet, the British legal system stands head and shoulders above many others, but those other systems have evolved and taken out some of those archaic kind of duplications for their system. And we haven't grown with that until very recently.
Absolutely.
And, I was about to say, and yes, you're literally emphasizing the reason why people ought to be able to go to somebody like you, David, because I'm listening to you and I was smiling and thinking, I wish I'd known David like 6 years ago, because he might have saved me an awful lot of money. But you're actually emphasizing the complexities that nobody knows about. So just hearing you talk,
I believe people should have options. I mean, I can go on about other things that you'll be really surprised that you can do, but you know, we're time limited. But yes, people should have their options, and if this particular route isn't for them, for whatever the reason is, then at least they should be told. And I guess roughly half of our clients come to us at the beginning of their divorce, which is when we would love to see them because we can get them on the right road. And the other half come to us when they're already in the divorce process. They've got a solicitor, they may well have a barrister, and have been fighting the other side for months or even years in some cases. And you know, in the medical world, you do get second opinions, even third opinions. In the legal world, very rare to get a second opinion. And you know, we review existing cases and tell people what we think. I mean, sometimes we find that things have been missed in their cases. We find there's a different tactical approach, or even one of these different routes that they should be on.
And for a therapeutic professional that has a client that's going through that, and all of the emotional turmoil that's created, being able to have that link to go, look, here's some professional support that's going to be able to give you that know-how because you are that specialist, then that takes an awful lot of pressure. The impact of being on the right path in that process of saving, knowing that you've got the best value pathway in front of you, changes the entire dynamic of that therapeutic engagement just as much as it does with the legal process.
It does, because when you're able to give that number to somebody and they feel guided by somebody that knows what they're talking about, that you've provided that to them, that in itself shows the importance of the relationship between you and them, because actually they can spend more money working through the stress of the divorce without knowing what they've got to do in that divorce in the therapeutic space, when actually there's somebody like David that can take that entire stress away because he knows what the systems are and can guide. So it actually reduces the cost spent in therapy as well, because it's one less stress to deal with that they're trying to process in the therapy space. And it's just great to have David's number. I come back to it again and again because I've seen the impact. It gives people a sense of control by being able to go to somebody else. It makes them feel confident that they've got somebody on their side without an agenda. And it takes away all that legal stuff that they might want to talk in the therapy space and the stress of not knowing and the cost involved. It just removes it. And literally it does save money on both sides.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just talking about saving money. I mean, just one very silly in a particular way example of how people can waste money is we all know that if you go and see a solicitor in a divorce situation, one thing you do want to do is to tell the solicitor how horrible your other half is, and people go on and on and on about that. Now, what the solicitors don't say to the client, which I think they should say, is, look, I'm very happy to sit here and listen to you going on about your other half and how awful they've been. But I really ought to tell you that it's got no bearing whatsoever on the financial outcome. But if you want me to listen to it, then I'm happy to do so. I'm going to put it on my timesheet, and I'm going to charge you my time at £300 or £400 or £500 an hour plus VAT. What we do is we stop people using their solicitors as therapists, because the solicitors are not trained to do that. And we get the clients to come and see people like you, because if they're going to spend £400 or £500 an hour with a solicitor, they can have however many sessions with you for the same money. And you can actually help them with the emotional stuff. And the lawyers are not trained to do that. And that's just one of the very sort of simple ways that we stop people wasting their money.
Yeah.
And David, you are an absolute diamond to be able to have created a company so that actually clients have that access to understanding what they don't know, because that's where I see the synergy between us so beautifully. And I smile because I am grateful to have your number in my back pocket. I know you've given me personal advice and it helped me out more than you could ever possibly know, because I took that advice from somebody that knows better than me, and I'm very comfortable to acknowledge that, and it worked for me in a fantastic way. So even your time today, you know, it's an opportunity to be able to share you with as many therapists as we can, because I don't know one therapist that's been in practice for maybe 3 years and they've not had somebody sitting in front of them going through a divorce. In fact, I'd say they have loads of people in that time. So having you there, thank you for being part of our world, because it works beautifully. And that's where I feel emotional for what my clients can get. You know, I genuinely care about my clients, so I want them to have the best. And if I don't know it, I'd much rather have confidence to refer them to somebody who does know it and can help them in the way that they need. So it's so great to have you here, and thank you, because you always raise a smile in me.
Thank you. Thank you.
David, I know we've got only a couple of minutes left.
So anybody who has benefited from this conversation, you can get a CPD recognition for this time. Within the link to this episode, there will be the CPD questionnaire. You'll be able to fill that in, validate what it is that you've benefited and how that helps you in your practice, and get that CPD to go towards your annual hours for your ongoing learning. David's business is Divorce Solutions, and there is a link to David's business directly from APA's website in our collaboration partners, and we are exceptionally honored to be able to have that link. So David, for your time, for your know-how, for sharing, I want to say a massive thank you. And
thank you.
I hope that the awareness of all of these new changes that come through are going to benefit the therapeutic sector so that they can benefit their clients. That's it. And both Siobhan, David, and myself are totally dedicated to ensuring that the best outcomes come for those individuals going through those experiences.
And I'd just like to add, if anybody sees this video, doesn't know how to find the link to David Margo, we do have a Facebook group. It is under APA. Anybody can ask any question on there, and we will happily give his number out over and over and over, which of course I know benefits David, but most importantly, it benefits us to be able to pass the number on. And most importantly, it benefits the clients that actually need that help. So thank you so much, both Davids. Thanks for being here today. And it's a real pleasure to do what we've done and educate people and increase their awareness. So thank you, and take care, everyone.
We'll see you in another episode very, very soon. David, thank you. Take care.